Hello, and thank you for joining us today for The Issues. I'm your host, Vern Fuller. On a visit to St. Louis in the early 1960s, civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that the church remained the most segregated institution in America. In fact, separate worship had a long heritage. Former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder said that we live in a nation of cowards when it comes to discussing the issue of race relations. On today's show, we focus on this hot topic of race relations in St. Louis and how to reach out to one another and conquer what some call a racial divide. With recent issues in our great city, the entire country and many around the world are watching to see how we exist with one another with regards to race relations in St. Louis. I took to the streets of St. Louis and asked local people how they felt about the state of race relations in our city. Let's take time to listen to some of the comments which were shared.
In my opinion, Jim Crowism hasn't been done away with. It just evolved from overt to covert, especially in St. Louis. The unrest that's in Ferguson is just indicative of a problem that's been systemic for generations.
You know, you hate to say it in this day and age that people rely on bigotry or stereotypes. So that's a problem that I have. You know, I grew up in the Northeast originally. It's a very big melting pot, and you just hate in this day and age that we would even see that. But I just think it's take the time to listen and to know people for who they are and not necessarily what you hear on the news.
Today we are going to grapple with the subject of race relations and also discuss what some may consider solutions if in fact there is a divide which is keeping us from coexisting to our greatest potential in our great city. Joining me right now is Adolphus Pruitt, local president of the St. Louis chapter of the NAACP, Jimmy Cavadas, longtime Southside resident and local business owner, and Omar Maldonado, leader of the Hispanic Leaders Group. Or member of the Hispanic Leaders Group, I should say. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for coming to the issues.
Thank you.
Why is race relations such a hot topic right now?
No, that's easy. I mean, with the death of Mike Brown, with all of the local protests and all the things as relates to police and community relations, whenever you have things of that nature, race is always going to come into play, and then right on the heels of local elections, both, even some national elections. Everything for the past 90 days has been centered around race in one way or another.
Anxiety is running high. I mean, there's reports of Walmart selling out of ammunition, reports of guns flying off the shelves in gun stores. Is there a racial divide that merits this kind of behavior in St. Louis?
You know, I'm always weary when those type of things come out and people talk about, oh, there's people buying up ammunition, because sometimes there's groups out there that'll do that just to kind of stir the pot. I mean, the reality is that a lot of ammunitions were running out prior to this whole event, and that had to do with some back ordering that was taking place. And so hunters that went out, I know for a fact that a lot of that ammunition was already on back order. So I'm always really careful as to those particular topics or subjects that come up, and they start focusing it on one particular event that happened here in St. Louis.
It's interesting, from the people I spoke with, some say there's absolutely a racial issue and that we are afraid to discuss it and that we need to discuss it. Others say there's no racial issue whatsoever. Jimmy?
Well, this situation that happened was unfortunate. Nobody wants to see their child die, period. And for it to be, I have no problem with wanting justice, but we have to seek a way to do it peacefully. And I think there are people that are not part of the community that are causing this to be worse than what it is. If I was a father, mother, we all handle our grief in different ways. I don't know how I would react because I'm not in that situation. However, I don't think it should be brought to a racial issue. I think it should be brought to the point of what happened, no matter what happened, and let's find out the truth and let's deal with the truth. If the man's guilty, he's guilty. If the man's innocent, he's innocent. Our community, I've been in South St. Louis 65 years, and I've seen a lot of good. And right now, South St. Louis has become more African American, and that's okay. 85% or 90% of my business is with the African community.
And do you still live in South St. Louis?
I still live in South St. Louis, have the house I grew up in, bought it from my father, and we don't have problems. I mean, we try to, I've been fortunate. I have not had any theft or any violence in my area, but you can't let the few make the few bad ones make everybody look bad, the truth. And I think that's what's happening. When you're upset, I just don't know. I just don't know the answer, except to get along and to speak to one another and say, why do you want to do this? Example, when I was opening up my business, 4 young African-American children walking by. One young man had his pants down past his butt. I didn't go up to him and say, what are you doing? I said, what's your name, young man? And he answered me, and I said, you know, I'm opening up a business here, and one day I might sell you kids a car. Would you do me a favor and protect me? And by the way, your pants are down. Well, my day, we wore bell bottoms, and we had our hair down. It's an expression. Does it look good? No, but it's an expression. I don't know if that's a good example.
Yeah, let's be real clear. Race is prevalent in the discussion. The issue is that because of it's more classes, socioeconomics, all it is adverse outcome of socioeconomics. It is a byproduct of poverty and inequities, financially inequities. The fact that most of the folks at the bottom in the urban areas happen to be African American, then that issue about socioeconomics now is clouded with the issue of race. The other side of it is when you talk about police, community relations, and how the police are dealing with this subculture or this subclass of people socioeconomically, the same way they treat folks in the urban areas who happen to be all black, where if you were to go outstate to some of the smaller communities that were predominantly white, the poor whites in those areas would say that the police treat them the same way. So it's an issue of policing and how they look at this second class, what they term is a second class citizen based on socioeconomics. If you were stopped in West County and you looked like you lived in West County, when the police walked up to your car, I don't care what color you are, their frame of mind, their frame of reference, how they interact with you, how they approach with you, is totally going to be different if you took that same officer and placed them on Goodfellow and Natural Bridge, or if you took them to a trailer park in outstate Missouri that may be all white. The perception is that they're dealing with a subculture of second-class people, and that those folks happen to be a breeding ground where criminal activity fester, and because of that, their approach and how they look at it, their perspective is different.
So
that's the problem, is changing their perspective.
If I'm hearing you correctly, Adolphus, it's not so much a race issue as it is a class issue?
It's definitely a class. The racial part comes out depending on where the encounter takes place and who's predominant in that geographic location. Again, if I were to take you to a trailer park, or you go up to the Appalachian Mountains where the coal miners were, poor coal miners, they would tell you that the sheriff and police treat them differently than they treated the folks who worked, the middle class folks, and other folks who live throughout their region. That's just the case. Police, poverty breeds adverse social outcomes. One of those adverse social outcomes is a black market and sometimes in crime.
And so police are geared up to treat it that way. Cops, community-oriented policing, if they have an area where there's a lot of policing, they surround that area and they stop people and they treat them a certain way to sort of root out the crime, where you have some people in there that are law-abiding citizens. But the fact that geographically they're in that space and the fact that their race is equivalent to the folks they're looking for is one and the same, so they react that way.
Because I have to align myself, and coming in on this, Omar, I have to align myself with the fact that having been to Ground Zero during the protests many times, it wasn't just black people there. There were black people, white people, people of Asian, Hispanics. Everyone was represented there. It wasn't a black, white, or void of white, members of St. Louis. Omar?
And when we bring up policing a lot because that's the hot button topic right now. But this is much deeper than policing. This incident happened because of something else that's rooted, and we need to start taking a look at our history. Number one, all these issues come about from things that are rooted in our history, things that are rooted in the programs that we have available, in the way we live every day, within the way our work. The culture within the places that we work and how it affects us. All those things are components that create this environment. The policing is just one aspect if you want to talk about policing, but we can talk about all these other things. We're talking about race relations, period. And that goes across the board and touches on a lot of different things. So when we want to make an impact on race relations, we need to start taking a look at those other components as well, such as the institutions for education, such as what are we doing to make sure that we have things work in place for people within their own communities, such as what are we doing to start these conversations and get them going, because without identifying and dealing with that, without dealing with our history and what we've gone through, all that other conversation is going to be futile. Because we're just putting a Band-Aid on the cut.
Well, it's interesting you say that because Jimmy Cavadas, I've spoken with you, and you say part of the problem is that we don't remember history.
That's correct.
And particularly African Americans, if I may go so far.
I agree. What the culture has gone through, their forefathers, just to get the right to walk and talk and be able to vote, I think that is not prevalent to the younger generation. I'm not saying the older generation, I'm saying the younger generation. And I think that things need to be, what's a solution? Do we need to look at how we're spending our monies? How are we spending our monies? Are we getting anything? Because if you're going to spend some money, you want a return on your investment. And a return on an investment would be beautiful to have children be able to succeed on their own and to go forward in their lives because they will pay taxes. So there's your return. A human life is so precious, just to be alive. And I think people don't really realize just the fact to be able to breathe and be alive today. And let's start getting along. Let's deal with it. Like this gentleman said, it is a class issue.
Adolphus, what's the solution?
Yeah, I mean, all of it is finding a way to bring the part of society that is out of the economic mainstream into it. Housing patterns lead to segregation. Mm-hmm. You have to have money and finances to eliminate the housing pattern. Poor education, again, mm-hmm. You have to have dollars which are generated from property taxes and other things mm-hmm. in order to upgrade educational system the way you want to be. Poor health, you have to be able to pay for insurance in order to get the best medical care. It all comes down to people. Listen, everybody just wants to live the American dream. Mm-hmm. They just want a piece of the pie. You have a lot of people that are left out of it. And I want to address this voter apathy thing because let's be clear. The election we just had, it was the lowest turnout nationwide since 1942.
Wow.
So it was a whole bunch of people didn't vote, not just black people.
Okay.
Voter apathy and people fed up with the folks that sit in Washington, and in some cases, their local communities is prevalent throughout America, irrespective of whether it's the urban core or outstate. The lowest since 1942, and black folks staying at home cannot make that statistic happen. Had to be a whole bunch of white folks and other folks who didn't participate either. So we need to quit looking at those things and concentrate on getting people pathways to what they see as their salvation so they can self-actualize. People just want to self-actualize and be respected. That's all they really want. And they don't want to, and all of them don't want to be millionaires.
Well, do we do that through programs? Do we do that through leadership? Do we do that through spiritual leaders, politicians? How do we do that right here in St. Louis?
Here's the thing that St. Louis has. The great thing about St. Louis is that St. Louis, we are known throughout the nation as being number one with diversity programs, creating these opportunities, showing other companies and organizations how things should be run to include all. But there's this huge gap in what we say and what we do. And that's number one. Number two is we have a lot of great organizations. There's a lot of things. I remember Aeneas Williams, he said one of the best things that we do a lot of things right. And he's absolutely right. We do a lot of things right. There's a lot of great organizations out here that do really good things. However, there's a lot of organizations that aren't working together. And we're trying to put out all these little fires instead of consolidating those efforts and changing these things. This is about a perception, whether it's real or not, of power, and understanding what that means to the people that it impacts. And through that, getting people to work together and to collaborate and start changing those, again, work areas, places where we live, institutions that have a broader impact and can start changing the culture. Because if we try to do it individually, it's never going to work. We need to do it as a group, and we need to bring others in. And that means if we need to work on ourselves, and we understand that within ourselves something's happening that's prohibiting us, we work with others to say, hey, this is my support group to help me change those things. We need to do the same things with the organizations, is to use those other ones as a support group to help us move forward. Because otherwise we're going to do the same thing that we have always done, a lot of good intentions, not a lot of movement.
Great feedback, Omar. Thank you so much for that. Omar Maldonado of the Hispanic Leaders Group, Jimmy Cavadas, Southside longtime resident and local business owner of Reed Auto Sales, and Adolphus Pruitt, president of the St. Louis chapter of the NAACP. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Stay with us. When we return, we're going to talk about solutions. We want your input as well. Please give us your questions on our STL TV Facebook page at The Issues. We'll read one of them live later on in the show.
We got a long way to go. I grew up white. There's a whole lot of assumptions that go into that, of certain privileges that you don't know you have, and you don't know you have it until you talk to somebody who doesn't have it, and then you really realize that there's this kind of a systemic injustice, not only in St. Louis but in America.
I mean, I don't think there's a prescription you could write to say, how can we get from 0 to 100? I just think it's going to take time. I think Martin Luther King would be a little disappointed right now the way things are going.
And welcome back to The Issues. Longtime business owner Jimmy Cavadas is still here, and joining us is Susan Talvey of Central Reform Congregation. Welcome, Susan, to The Issues.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. We want to really focus on solutions right now. How about we start with a Facebook fan's question?
Okay.
What's the remedy? How can we as a city learn to understand, accept, and respect each other's inherent differences, which include race, gender, ethnicity, and creed?
Well, I mean, big question. And I think everybody has to do their part. When my congregation started 30 years ago, we made a commitment to be in the city because we recognize that one of the greatest problems in this area is racism. And if we were going to move to the suburbs, another kind of white congregation, another white group moving to the suburbs, we could not be part of the solution in the same way that we could be being in the city. And I'll tell you, being where we are, and I think this is probably true of many religious places, but being where we are, we get a lot of visitors. And you know, the challenge is to be as inclusive as possible so that we have opportunities to interact and create relationships. And not just that, but to create relationships of trust. And I have to say this, you know, this kind of movement that came from that moment, that awful moment that Mike Brown was shot. This movement is also doing a lot to bring people together. I know people are focusing on the anger and the divides and the people taking sides, but really inside this movement, people of all races, all religions, all creeds, ages, genders, transgenders, people of all kinds of situations are coming together because we have a common goal, and that is to bring justice to the young black and brown youth that are raising up their voices and saying, listen to us. And you know, just this, the opportunity to come together with a common goal. I belong to something called the Don't Shoot Coalition. Meets every Wednesday. 50 organizations. Can you imagine this? 50 St. Louis organizations
50.
that meet every Wednesday and stay focused on a single goal. Now, we have a lot of differences in other areas of our, you know, organizations, but on this we are very clear. We're fighting racism, we're trying to take the moment, make it a movement, and we're working together. And so trust and conversations and dialogue is being built across all those lines that the Facebook person has brought up. And I think that that's going to help us here in St. Louis.
I love the way you bring up these, your activities, which I have followed, by the way. But Susan, let me take a moment just for clarification. Rabbi Susan Talby,
Yes.
and it's a congregation, not a synagogue, not a church.
It's a synagogue. It's a Jewish synagogue. It's a congregation in the city of St. Louis. It's a synagogue, right?
Okay,
I'm
because
a
our
rabbi,
viewers are
I'm
going to go,
Jewish.
okay,
Right.
what is it?
Yeah, and there are many synagogues in the region of St. Louis, but we're the only one in the city, and that's another one of the problems.
And
We
yet
have
you
the
say all are
city-
welcome.
Everybody's welcome.
Okay.
In fact, we've worked very hard to be integrated. At first, 30 years ago, you know, in the early 80s when AIDS was a big deal, we worked very hard to be open to the LGBTQ community.
Okay.
Then we had opportunities to really be welcoming to the transgendered community. And really, the other thing about being in the city is we have become very aware that there are Jews of color and that want to be part of our community. And so, but we had to dig deep. We had to do our own dismantling, I'm not sure I like that word, but this dismantling of racism that is prevalent in our society.
And do you reside in the city of St. Louis, just out
No,
of curiosity?
I
That's
don't.
okay, that's
I don't.
okay.
I don't.
Jimmy, you do.
Yeah,
you
you're in the
do.
city.
Correct.
What do you see? Now, it sounds to me like you reside in Harmony on the south side of St. Louis. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay.
There's crime everywhere. It's not just prevalent. And in, like the gentleman earlier on your program said, it's a monetary issue more so than color. The poor creates, poverty creates crime. And I really believe that we got to start getting along, and we got to hold people, the parents of these children who are shooting other children and shooting, somebody's got to stand up. If, let's say in my neighborhood, there was a shooting, or a person's living in an area, I know he's living in that area. It is my responsibility, anonymously or however, to report that, to get that out of the community. We were talking about that. It's not the good people that are causing the problem, it's the radicals. I'll say radicals that are taking the guns. For whatever reason, they've lost their focus on life, in my opinion.
Direction.
Direction would be a good one.
Okay.
So to solve that problem, that community, I don't live there, they got to be honest with the police, and the police have got to be honest with them. and together pull out the problems and get help to the problem. There's people that are in dire need of help.
And
okay?
I absolutely agree with you and appreciate that feedback. Rabbi Susan Talby, what can St. Louis do to assist your movement? It sounds like you have some synergy going here.
We do.
And are making a difference.
And the point is, it's not my movement because I'm old. This movement really belongs to this next generation.
Okay.
Next generation of black and brown youth leaders. And that's why it's so complicated, because, you know, we're going back and forth speaking about crime and gangs and drugs and, you know, all this. And I don't want it to get mixed up with the, sorry.
That's your mic,
Yikes,
that's okay.
Sorry. I don't want it to get mixed up with the wonderful work that's being done by these young leaders that are saying, our lives matter. It wasn't okay that Mike Brown laid in the street, you know, for over 4 hours. That wasn't okay. That could have been us.
Yes.
And they're calling us to, and you know, yes, it is a class issue. There are a lot of class issues bound up in this, but primarily it's a race issue because, you know, what I hear from people of all economic backgrounds, if they are a person of color, they've been profiled in St. Louis.
True.
So profiling is a problem here. And for the youth, it's not just profiling, it's profiling and provoking. And it's not just by police, it's shop owners, not you. But other shop owners, you know. But it's people in stores. It's people on the street.
Right.
If you're black or brown, you're taught, you know, to keep your head down when you're a kid, to not make noise, to not have an attitude, and that's just not okay. White kids don't have to learn that. So we have a problem here with race, and I don't want the crime, all the crime stuff, to get mixed up with this wonderful movement that these young people are lifting up.
Please, because I want to keep us on track for solutions. And I think you just really hit on something that some call white privilege. Do you two agree that that exists?
Oh my gosh.
To a certain degree,
Okay,
yes.
but still,
Yeah,
I
we don't
think
even
that we
realize
want to
it.
really talk about
Sure.
solutions. So let's keep it there.
Okay.
It sounds like you have some positive things going on, and I don't necessarily mean you as an individual, but
The
your
movement does,
organization.
absolutely,
Jimmy
right.
Cavadas, you've got a business in a predominantly, I don't know, maybe it's a mixed area, but it's definitely the city of St. Louis, and
Correct.
you live in a predominantly what's now become African-American community on the south side.
Yes.
So
that's correct. But I don't look at it that way. I mean,
Well, maybe that's part of the solution.
well, look,
Maybe that's it. If we stop looking
If-
at black and white,
if
is that realistic?
people are always going to do that. You know, it's from the roots, like the lady said. It's from the roots, and you're trying to change the roots. But I still think to change it, you have to get with the families. The family unit has to change this.
But I don't think we can have it both ways. I don't think we can have those who don't know history and then still say it's from the roots. You know what I mean?
I'm talking about the prejudices from roots.
Okay.
I'm talking about
Knowledge of history.
Knowledge of history,
Okay.
what the parents went through, like we talked before, what they went through.
Right.
So a solution, you said a solution. Let me throw one out there. Stop busing and take all that money and redo everything in those neighborhoods. Let's try that. That's just a suggestion. Who knows if this works?
Jimmy Cavadas, owner of Reed Auto Sales, 4400 South Kings Highway. Thank you so much. Rabbi Susan Talby of the Central Reform Congregation. Thank you so much for both of you for being on the issue. And thank you. And I hope we have provided a lively discussion about a very important issue facing the St. Louis community. We'd also like for you to be part of our efforts, so please join us for our next show and continue to support us here at STL TV. I'm Vern Fuller, and for all of us here on The Issues, have a good day.